Hey people, let me show you some of the magic in this ancient language. You know, the particle of oxygen, that's oxygen. You know, oxygen that you breathe is O2, and O1 is an oxide, and O3 is ozone. That's a bi, too. And the particle of oxygen comes from the branches of all. They always say this is all. And the only reason they put no in here is because they're not reading this. They're reading it here as the clocks begin. When the clocks begin, there was no trees in the garden to create the particle of oxygen. You know, the trees are the engine that make the oxygen. So they use a whole bunch of different words and they'll mix them up for branches and bows in here. You see this one here is the to deliver to. And that word comes up here several times. They knew it was here, so they interpreted this other word as deliver. But this is a screwed up chapter. It's 18 long lines, and blah blah blah. In this time, the Son of Man say to the Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and to his multitude, to whom are you like in your greatness? Indeed, Assyria, a cedar in Lebanon fine, with branches in forest that shaded and high of stature. And it was the biggest and most beautiful tree, and it growed down to the waters underneath, and exalted above all the trees, and all the birds and all the beasts made their nest in this tree. And it was the party wild to clutch it. The party wild to clutch it, and his branches brought forth their young, all the beasts. And all the nations made their home in the shadow of this great and beautiful tree. And it was much more beautiful than all the trees in God's garden. So man had growed a tree better than God, is what it's saying. And no tree in the garden of God not was like it in beauty. And so this like it in beauty, this is it's talking about smell. This is alive in a hive. When he created man and blowed life into his nostrils, to wipe in a hive into his nostrils. And you see that in the next word, the wife minus the and is kind of reading backwards, but live in a pie. And it smelled beautiful. And all the trees of God envied it. And God said, but being that you are so beautiful, I shall cut you down, and you shall deal with the mighty one of the nations, and surely for its wickedness I have driven out the curse of grass stew. The curse of grass stew. It means get on out of here, make some grass between me and you, the grass stew. In the curse of grass stew. And so that's where your word cursive comes from, as in writing in cursive. And it actually means the curse. If you're riding in a chariot and writing, you're going to be writing in cursive whether you like it or not. Your pen's going to drag. That's where your word cursive come from. You connect all your letters. You try not to pick up your pen. And to cut it down in the aliens and in the terrible nations, and its ruin will remain. And in these depths among the sons of men who go down to the pit, and they all can go down to hell. And of its fall I made shake the nations when I cast down it to hell, together with those who descend into the pit. With everybody who drinks water, you all go down to hell with it, with them slain by the sword. And all y'all uncircumcised, y'all going to hell too. And so it says, that God was jealous and was acting a little bitch. So I'm going to read you some phrases in here that you recognize, but first I'm going to tell you about the law of Hemiamihu. You know, the majority of your tax dollars, the government spends all this on programs to keep you ignorant. And if we could all just swear an oath to remain ignorant, we could save about 90% of our tax dollars. And even the people performing this, is the Loamhoos. They don't even realize it's going on. They're just chasing the wave. But this is a word I used to hear old country girls say it. It's your children, the Loamahu. The low, and Arzum Loamahu. The ones underneath you. Your children. The sprouts coming up in the garden that are underneath. The new recruits that you're training. Arzum Loamahu. Begin. They're just beginning. All him bruising the young fruit. And you can see that in the base word of virus in there, the virus. In Arzum Loam who begin, all him bruisem laid 'em too. Laid 'em, L-A-D, laid, to load, to put it on, to laid 'em, and all bruisem laid 'em. And all soft of worm in them, all soft of worm in them, less of Vic, the particle of oxygen. All him laid me alive by pive to inhale. And so this whole chapter is insinuating that this word, all him, is a tree, the biggest tree in the garden. But I don't know about the European chestnuts, but they say that America was full of chestnuts, American chestnut, and they say that we brought a worm and the soft of the worm in them. And so we lost all our chestnuts trees, 100 years ago, but the stumps have been coming back, they've been pushing back. So all your chestnuts you see growing down, you usually see them growing out the side of an old wormy stump. And so the soft of worm in them, it may have been synonymous with the chestnut tree at the time, but it doesn't mean that's what any of these words mean. And you also see the soffit. The soffit is the under part, and that's where the oxygen will be coming from, the oxygen. But this Loamahu begin here looks more like your little brothers, in Arzum Loamahu begin, all him bruise 'em, putting bruises laid 'em too. And when you come back and read it with here, it turns this to the law, the L-A-W, and it's the law of them, E-M, them mom, M-O-M-M-E, them mommy, the law of them mommy, of gun'em yell, and go yell at mommy, all them bruise 'em, laid 'em. And if you're reading it with the rule of the Egyptians, the double M's follows by an I, and it's Arzum, the law of Hemi, the bleed, the homie, and bleed homie who, and that fits more with, suck all the sunlight up. And then backwards, begin from the yellow lay'em, the sunshine laid 'em, and bleeding all your little brothers from the sunshine. And I tell you, this diamond above the S, it means to omit that letter in one of these passages. I'm not sure which time, but this same word, it's where you word, the broom, the baroom, you omit that S comes from, and it's the brew, the bruise, the bruisem, and the brewem. Arzum Loamahu begin, all him brewem. He's in the forest digging up the roots. And so the moral of the story is, when you're creating your fallout shelter, make sure you put about 1 million years worth of oxygen in there, because that's what they do, is God takes out the trees. And Arzum Loamahu begging, the begging all him. They'll try to tell you it wasn't till 1772 that some scientists figured out that we had to water plants, and before that we were all just a bunch of morons. And it wasn't till 1779 they discovered photosynthesis. And they'll try to tell you this word oxygen comes from the Greek oxus, meaning to sharp, and genos, to give birth, or to generate, to create. And so they got the gen right, in the garden, the generation. And here they'll say this gens means, the forming in acid. The Greeks would have had to known about a single atom of oxygen as an oxider, and it binds with everything real easy, and it causes oxidation. And that would be the process of an oxygen passing ions. And that's what forms acid. So the Greeks had to know this then. And the trees have other jobs, and when a toxie had in alerts. But it looks like the base of the word comes more from axe. When they shall make an ark of wood of acacia was war when axes time. It was the time to break out the axes. It was a war against the trees. Also where you were, the Nazis' time, the wood of acacia. And Nazis means we ain't sleeping. But it has everything to do with the tree, and you see it here, to seed the tree is root, R-O-O-T-S, is roots. And it doesn't come into the garden until the second chapter, when the garden was planted. And it's, the oxygen. And so, it comes after this word Michael. And they say Michael means that who is like God. Michael, oxygen, to make all the gin. Nothing gets created without the oxygen. And this is a clitical. Clitical. It's where you word political and apolitical. And it's where they're getting this commanded over here. And it's switched to you hail. You, it's just the Y-E-W. You hail, H-A-L-E. You hail him. Which to you hail him. You inhale your life breath. Which to you hail him. All had 'em lammer. All had 'em say. From clocks agenoclitical. From clocks agenoclitical. From when the clock's running, there's oxygen. Nothing lives without the oxygen. Every tree of the garden, to make of oxygen a clitical. And I'm sure that's where your word critical comes from. And so this particle of oxygen here, it tells me either, King James thought you was so ignorant that you couldn't understand photosynthesis in the particle of oxygen that's coming out of the trees, or they didn't understand it and they were writing this interpretation from pictures on the wall with arrows pointing underneath the branches on the soffit too, underside, the soffit too. The warming them less of give the particle of oxygen with less sun, they're all being shaded. They had all the diagrams labeled, they just didn't understand the science. So the oxygen that was coming out of the leaf here just became, the trees generate. And we just simply don't understand that garden means to ingenerate, to begin a vegan, veggin. When you're in a vegev state, you need mothering. You're in the garden, in the beginning of creation. When your clocks begin. So the most important part of this is over here where I yada yada yada. But if you don't read that, you don't understand. And from these words here, I know how they mistranslate them. But Egypt is the gift, and to fall is usually to pull. And this is ass, the gift to pull ass. Same thing we say today, hey, me and my partner, we're going to go out and try to pull some ass. But there was no gift in here. In here it was the crime. Egypt is the crime to pull ass. And like I say, the crime, this is the book of the moon, and the gift, that was the book of the sun. But this is, who they, why they, who they enact as the reason, have insolicive ahead, into acquire more, into solicive ahead, leads I'd of reeve, all a lammer. And so reeve, R-I-E-V-E, they'll say it means to rob or thieve, the two flip spellings being the same, to rob, plunder. But it's more to rub or grate, like your reeve, if you're a jeweler, every time you're polishing somebody's gold, you're polishing it off into your little thieve box, your reeve box, catch all the little shakes. And he's saying, that who of they who enact as the reason in solicive ahead, into go ahead, the leads, the little sneaky clues, the leads I'd of reeve, I'd of great, all elamer, and all the elamer that's in the writings, all in the exaggerated details. But there's a lot more code in there. In the lead side, in reveal elamer. And so the lead side, you would think it's in front, but when you're sailing, the lead side is the wind. And after you pass, in the lead side, after you pass in reveal elamer, you don't see it all until after you pass through. Ben Adam moral for all 'em lack 'em crime. This is like calling somebody a name and naming them for what they did. He been had 'em a moral for all them lack from crime. But what it does say is here, is KMX, Chemits, the Chemits rim. And so Kemet, was Egypt, and the rim would be the outskirts of Egypt. And so, Ben Hadam Amor, not the son of man, but Ben Hadam Amor. And so Hadam Amor, this is the platform that you see statues standing on, and that's a mar, raised platform. Same word for a pyramid. The mar means raised, means more, higher. And so Ben Hadam Amoral, you're telling a story, and everybody's name is for a reason, and you have to put the right name in that story to make it make any sense, And so Ben Hadam Amoral for all lack. The dude that never had any morals, is what it's saying, from the crime. And, this crime possibly may have come from lack on its rim, from the ones that believe there was no rim around the earth. That was a crime at one time. And all the money, the Greeks, they turn this vav, this U, into the Y. And you can see here, and when you're reading the lower markings, it's a double U, two U's, which is a Y, I. And all the money, all made 'em it. The big deal give. Ka at the end is your, and made 'em it big deal in your greatness. In a ass where ours in loving when. Ours, that's a pirate word. Let's let it's a pirate talking. It's pirate for, you are. You're the one, you are's in the ass where you are's in loving when. It's a sailor talking about paying his taxes. A knife on few chores, F-U, and few chores. A knife on futures. If you invested your money in the right place, a knife on few chores. And from excel to move ahead and gave fume. And usually they say this means height. And but height is, come to. How big the kids come to, what you coming to. But it's still talking about, the astrology and, to looking in on the futures from excel to give fume to rise of time, height. Here's your word for height, H-I-T-E, for the height, the smart to of its top. From 'em godly who tomb remit to, from them the godly who the tomb remit, who goes into the pyramids. Itinerary. The itinerary. Like I say, that T's going to be silent in one of these passes. But, they going in there for their planned route or journey. From 'em godly who tomb remit to itinerary. Elects survive what? The elect. The ones chosen to survive what? Model. This is a M-T-H-O, and the E gives it an L in there. Model. That's where they're getting that planted from. But I believe it means more model is into shape. What tality assail? What tality assail? The all clocks aside. All clocks aside. This is where your base word for death, of the field. When it says of the field, that means them soldiers didn't walk off the field. They were aside the road. And when all, clocks aside, all time stops. Death. All can give a come to from clocks aside. What ravines a roped of. All can give a come to, how high he come to. But this is also, where your word, you succumb to, and when you wake up out of it, you come to, and all can give a come to from clocks aside. What's ravine? And this word I come up through here. Those say ravine as many other words, but it means irrigation. What ravine? And you see that's what it's talking about right here in this sentence. It was exalted high above the others because, it reached the waters. Abundance. And the clocks aside water to be in. That's what's in the ravines and your irrigation canals. They all turn into the clocks aside the water be in. And clocks aside what ravines are of to. What arcane secret, what arcane party, P-A-R-T-Y, and from a memor in 'em, the B reading as an N, from the arcane party, a memor in 'em, in slew, the secret party, the memor, to remember the past, and in the soft fonicle. Like a follicle is where your hair will grow out. Well, a fonicle is the little pore on a leaf in the soffit, in the underside fonicle. The fonicle of a pessimist, a pessimist is the opposite of hope, And so, apes is the opposite of pessimy. And in soft of polyphonical of a pessimium. With it parte, the wild, a clitchet, a wildebeest, the wild, a clitchet. A side of excel, to move ahead, a side, the death of excel, to move ahead. Whose wise bucklage. And so this is that word goyim, and it's where your word guy comes from. And guys, people pronounce that M as a S, but it fits more as in of excel, wisem, who's a bucklage, home, the G is just a home with a silent G. And so the bucklage, is who into cull, the ones to selected, the bucklage. And who more, who more in 'em, whom more in 'em. In a clidgy more in 'em, in a clidgy more in 'em, more and, to tie it off at the pier. So I meant to go through here and just pull out phrases that I thought you might recognize easier, and then I get to read, and I think you ought to be able to recognize all of it. But this one's loaded up, and I'll get back on this some more. I'll cut this off here. Good day.